Why is it that we grind at our jobs so hard and play so little? The limited time off that we earn is a valuable resource that we hoard away for the things in life that we like most. PTO is all about the hobbies we do with our time off and what they do for us. Who knows? You might even find a new thing to try with your PTO. Or a sick day. Just don't tell the boss when it's a sick day. Welcome to the Paid Time Outdoors podcast.
I saw you in the dining room on your sick day pounding a burger. I keep a tally in my stand now, like my my hit list.
So most people use their PTO or paid time off to get away from the stress in their life. Our guest today, Josh, seems to trade one kind of intensity for another, from being a high school teacher in the classroom to Friday Night Lights as a coach. He was teaching basketball, teaching football, fatherhood, serving his community as a weekend firefighter. Josh has seen it all. And today we dive into how a guy who spends so much of his life serving others finds some time for himself. Let's welcome Josh. I've known Josh for quite some time. We were actually neighbors at one point, but weren't really friends yet. I think back in I don't know, what year was that, 2010?
Yeah, 2010, 2011 time in there.
Yeah, we were neighbors in a fancy dorm. The Suites is what it was called. And we played on the same rugby team. We kind of crossed paths with each other, but weren't really buddies yet. But that's kind of where I met Josh, is when I was in college. And later in life, we became pretty awesome friends. My wife gets along with his wife really nicely. Our dogs have even FaceTime.
They have. They love that. Berkeley was just asking the other day if we could do that again.
Yeah, yeah. We'll need to. We'll get him going. So, Josh, you've probably worked many jobs before you got to your career. What was your first job that you ever had, that you can remember ever having?
That's a good question, Mark. I was thinking about this the other day. And just as you spun up this podcast, and I really love the idea, and we can dig into that deeper as we go. Short answer, my first job was as a custodian, essentially for the company that I work now, in a salaried position. Now, granted, this was back when I was 15 or 16, so 20 years ago. That job was a little bit unique. It was, I don't know, a cubicle type building with a few offices. My roles were pretty simple: empty some garbage cans, do some vacuuming, wipe down surfaces. My dad was the head custodian, and it was up to me if I wanted to work or not. He'd be like, "Hey, I'm going in for 4 or 5 hours. Do you want to come in?" And that really depended on if I wanted to play PlayStation with my brothers, or do something else. A lot of times I probably decided I was just going to stay home, but it was easy cash when I decided to go in.
How old, how old do you think you were at the time of your first gig?
At that time, I wasn't driving yet, so probably 15. It could have been as early as 14. Definitely not child labor type stuff, but easy enough that there was no one there. It was after hours, usually on weekends and stuff, just emptying garbages, and pretty easy gig, especially easy if I don't want to go, I don't have to.
That's pretty nice. Did you have to interview with your dad?
But probably. And he's like, "Hey, you want to come to work with?" Sure. All right,
Yeah,
you're
you're too
hired.
much work,
So
buddy. I need your help.
exactly. Yeah.
Solid. The first job I can remember is like in Chicagoland where I grew up. I was shoveling snow. I was doing garbage cans. I mowed a couple of neighbors' lawns. I was doing stuff like that, and that kind of helped me figure out later in life what I really wanted to do and what I really didn't want to do. There's a really specific memory that I have. It was Take Your Kid to Work Day, where my dad brought me in to his job, and my dad works in the tire business. So when semis get flats on the side of the highway, he's the guy with the lights that probe, tell
Right.
you not to run into the parked semi. He lays on the highway and he fixes their tires. So we went in and they have a shop. And at his shop, there was this really old dude who was pushing a broom. It's a shop. And the guy was in his 80s and he was pushing a push broom, cleaning up pieces of tires, pieces of rim, stuff from the shop. And he said, that guy probably has not enjoyed his job for his entire life. Do something that you really like, that you really care about. Try some stuff out. So that's
100%, man.
one of my earliest memories of like jobs and working kind of with my dad for Take Your Kid to Work Day. But so you're doing custodial things. Did you like that job?
It was easy. It was nice not having anybody around. I think the best perk was my dad would hand me, I don't know, I'd tag along with him for 3 or 4 hours and he'd hand me a $20 bill, something like that. So from that there were no stakes, and obviously you'll see as I go through my background a little bit that has certainly changed I didn't hate it, but it was a job.
Yeah. Okay, so you do this job, you're a young man. What is the next job that comes around? What's the next career or job that you had in line?
Yeah, that started, middle of high school, and I did that, sporadically throughout those few years. Looking back, as I kind of reflect a little bit, I was more so encouraged by my parents, like, hey, focus on school, be a kid, we'll provide what you need, food and shelter, that sort of thing. Again, Christmas, you'll get your PlayStation games you want. So I had everything I needed, right? So I didn't really have any jobs up until college. I guess you could throw in that the summer before college, I donated plasma as frequently as I could. Although that was kind of brutal, having to get your protein checked and everything. And but hey, it was what would be pretty valuable beer money on my freshman year of college.
Yeah, can relate.
Yeah, no doubt. But my first actual job that I had an interview for, and I was, on a biweekly payroll, was for the school district I graduated from. I came back. I hired on a bunch of mostly college kids during the summer for the buildings and grounds department. Being that I, was playing rugby at the time and I had played high school football, I was one of the two strongest guys on the department. So we kind of got thrown all over the place. Sure, we would help a little bit with like cleaning lockers and scraping gum off of desks, but a lot of the things we did, hey, we need these heavy things moved. So they assigned myself and another fellow football player to do that. We were ripping carpets out. Um, and that was tough. We are making, I think it was minimum wage, which back then, I don't even know if it's changed since, to be honest. So it wasn't much. 30-minute unpaid lunch. That was tough work. The schools weren't air conditioned where we were working. You work in all conditions. They were pretty strict in the form of like, hey, if you're working, you're on the clock. You're not supposed to be texting or on your phone or anything. Now, when I say everyone that was a part of this, student or 18, 19-year-old cohort was on their phones at some point in the day, I mean, everyone was. Well, at the end of my first year, I got busted for texting, and I know, and I was texting my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now. So it's not like I was doing anything scandalous, but I got sent home early that day. Dad was kind of scratching his head. He's like, "Oh, what are you home for already?" It was noon. I'm like, "Oh, you were done working." And of course, this is like the second week of July, so there's no way you were down. And I was hoping, I was hoping like, heck, man, please bring me back. I don't really want to, tell my folks I got fired from my first real job. But I got a call that evening that, hey, we need you back. We cannot have you on your phone anymore. I'm like, okay, that's fine. So I may have been the only one after that that didn't go on my phone, except during my lunch break. But we made it through that year. They brought me back a second year, which I think was before my sophomore year of college, probably when we met, Mark. And they assigned me and one other student to the bus garage. And going into that, I'm like, hey, you know what? It's a job. It's going to pay something. That was tough because it was our job to clean every square inch of those buses. We weren't doing anything mechanical. Thankfully, they had two mechanics on the department that would fix up every bus. But we were, again, scraping gum, cleaning seats, wiping windows, waxing, polishing, etc. That ended up being kind of fun. The guy I worked with, him and I really bonded those 3 months. There was one day I remember Kelsey, who's my wife now, uh, she wanted to go on a tour of Stevens Point. She was pretty sold on going there, just wanted to tour officially. And she's like, hey, you go there. I'd really love to have you there for me. And I'm like, well, I have to work and I don't really want to miss out on, 8 hours of minimum wage.
Which now
I,
we kinda laugh about, but at the time, like, that's your whole world, man.
100%, because these jobs, up until, my last few, if you weren't there, you're not paid, which I know is a harsh reality for a lot of folks. And I definitely didn't want to take that for granted. So anyway, the guy I was working with, I told him, hey, man, I really need to go here for most of the day, just a couple days in advance. Could you vouch for me if needed? Like, I want to throw you under the bus, but hopefully it won't come up. They didn't really check on us, just kind of let us be, as for the castaways of the company. So anyway, I signed out. We had like a thumbprint system. I hopped in a car with Kelsey, made the drive to Stevens Point, which is like an hour 20 from, where we were living at the time.
They let you take a
And
swing bus. Did you get to
no,
drive through those things? Man,
no, that probably would have turned into a road chase or something. And they would notice quickly that one of their inventory is missing from their fleet. But we did the tour, made it back before the end of the day, clocked back in. And I was talking to the guy I was working with. I'm like, hey, did they come looking for me at all? And he said only one time, a little after lunch. And he said that he told our boss I was in the bathroom. He didn't come back after that. So we made it, man. I played a little hooky that day, and no harm, no foul. We scrubbed like crazy and got the buses taken care of. So,
That's awesome. So you
but
worked
yeah,
with some pretty cool people. You commiserated with some folks when you were doing this job. What was kinda like the work culture like? Did you have a few friends? Did some folks suck there? What was that like?
I would say for the most part, that first year was fun. We'd get assigned to different schools in the district, and we all got along really well. Even the adults who were full time custodians throughout the school year, they were fun to work with. We could razz each other a little bit. Towards the end, when I had the texting incident, that was a little frustrating because I found out who tattled on me, and I didn't approach that person. I was like, whatever. But I was also like, come on, man. Like, I know I see you on your phone all the day too. What are you doing telling on me for? But the second year when it was just us two at the bus garage, there was we got along well, and we didn't work with anyone,
Yeah.
else outside of that.
So you're working that position. What's next in your life? What big events happen next?
Going back to Stevens Point from our sophomore year, I had jumped into a food service role, where at the time, I believe it's transition now, and I'm sure they even changed their names, but we had the main buffet style offering right in the middle of campus, and then we had the a la carte option further out, closer to some of the classroom buildings. And you kind of divvy up where you'd spend time. You had to, I forget what the minimum was. It was like 12 to 15 hours a week you had to have in there around your work schedule, including weekends if necessary, to maintain employment. I started out, my very first gig was over at the a la carte center. I was washing dishes. And like, it wasn't bad. Kind of weird in the way that, like, I tell my wife even one of the chores I enjoy is washing dishes. And I think that that's part of my upbringing. I like to give my parents hard time sometimes. Like, we had a dishwasher, but it was never fixed. My dad would always say, well, I have two younger brothers, and he's like, well, we have three dishwashers in the house, so I don't think we need one. So I actually didn't mind that. Sometimes they'd bring back scraps of food for us, peasants in the back, and yeah, we'd blast music and have fun there. And eventually, that transitioned across a bunch of different areas throughout campus. That ended up turning into a student manager role, where now it was 22 hours a week to maintain. I was responsible for managing, I believe it was 6 different student employees. We're just making sure that their performance is up to standards. Mine is. We're working with some of the higher ups. If needed, we step up a little bit depending on the night and what the meals were. Some of the nights were tough. I remember starting to despise some of the boneless chicken wing nights at the buffet center at the Bow,
Hey, at
just
least you weren't
because.
at least you weren't a janitor during that time having to unplug the toilets. So
Exactly. Yeah.
unlimited wing night.
We were probably responsible for the toilet plugging, but I'll digress.
I have to say at the same time, Josh, we were athletes, so we were burning calories like crazy, so it's probably a pretty nice perk to be able to go into the dining facility and, like, eat. Like, as a college student, as you mentioned, I was also donating plasma. Part of it was for beer money, but another part of it was for groceries, and,
Totally.
like, of course, like, overall helping people was the thing, but they give you a gift card so you can spend money and buy groceries, buy whatever you need to, kind of like as a perk of doing it. Cause so many people are in need. They had this like, come in, we'll give you the first time during the week, we'll give you 20 bucks. If you come again, we'll give you like 40 more bucks. And so as like a broke college student, I was like, sweet, I need food. That was an awesome opportunity for me. So to have the perk in college, you're an athlete burning a ton of calories running across the rugby pitch, getting food, I'm sure was a major perk.
No doubt, man. And we'd get a few extra meal swipes per week, depending on the hours you put in. So, sometimes you finish your shift and you'd sit down and just fill your face. But anyway, touching on the plasma topic too, I had started doing that a little bit at the start of college again, just like you had mentioned. I hadn't done that. I probably went about 12 years without donating plasma. And back when COVID came around, um, I found out about a new study through, a plasma center in the area that we were living at the time. It said, "Hey, if you've had COVID, we'd like you to be a part of this study." And I think the compensation for that was, I think it was $100 per donation for up to 12 donations. And I'm like, okay, I literally have to sit there for like 40 minutes, maybe. I've got the health to do it. I fit
Mhm.
the criteria. So that was probably some of the easiest money I've ever made. But that was, only 4 or 5 years ago. Anyway, going back to the student manager position, I actually kind of liked that. I like to cook. It's a passion of mine. I learned, in that role, managing people, working with people. Being a leader looks like a lot of different things. I think the most effective thing was, just being there in the trenches, as they say in my current corporate life, lifting a hand where you can, encouraging and leading with encouragement. So that was a role I truly enjoyed, and I got that because my manager at the time took a chance on me, saw some leadership qualities, and he's like, "Hey, I think this would be a good fit for you." And I think that paid dividends in a couple of my future and my current role even.
So I'm sure you took some skills from that job, brought it to your next one. After we graduated, we all threw our hats, we all got our diplomas, we did our thing. And where'd you go after graduation?
After graduating, in fact, while I was still student teaching at the time, I was accepted a teaching role, teaching seventh grade junior high science, and I was ecstatic about it, man. It's a passion of mine, find something that isn't like work to you and is enjoying that you can give back. And to me, I mean, I just felt that embodiment with teaching. I knew I wanted to coach. I had played sports ever since I was little. I wanted to give back in that variety since, as I get a little bit older and things hurt more than they used to, that maybe I'm not playing anymore. I'm always open if the Packers need someone, but I'm not sure that call will come.
I
So,
think they've got a water
yeah,
boy already, Josh.
thanks, Mark. I'm glad you think so highly of me.
Hey, water's essential to life. So that
It
is
is.
important. That's important.
Gatorade.
All right, so you worked as a teacher for quite a while. That's when we really became close friends because my now wife and I were living in the same town. Once our friends had graduated, a lot of them had moved away. There was a core group of us that stayed in the town that we graduated in because we loved it there so much. There were a few different job opportunities for us all. So we'd take some time, we'd get together, grab a burger and a beer once a week or, every couple weeks, celebrate holidays together. And that's when we became, pretty good friends, I'd say. I mean, your wedding was fun and all, but like, afterward we were
Like,
you were teaching and eventually, spoiler, Josh leaves teaching. Can you tell us about that?
um, I think I had taught for 3 or 4 years, and I had this itch the entire time I was teaching. I'm looking for a little bit more, like, my favorite part of teaching was, and always will be, the students. Teaching 7th grade was right in my niche, man. They are goofy, I could be goofy. I was taller than 95% of them, which, when I came in was big for me. I actually wanted to teach high school. Stepping foot into high school and looking up at everyone, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, how am I gonna establish myself as, the leader of the room?" And I probably could have done that. But 7th grade was it. And the kids were great. But I had this itch of, kind of going back to that student manager role, like I want to lead in a different way. And to me, the simplest path for that could be as a department chair, but more so an administrator or a principal. So about 3 or 4 years in, I spent about 2 years or so to work on maintaining my master's in educational administration, which I got. I was able to use that during summer school as a principal at the high school of the district we were teaching in. That was a great experience, getting the lead and curriculum planning and even development, helping students who maybe didn't pass a class during the school year really focus in so they can get that credit, to maintain on track and graduate. But also helping kids that are just looking for something to do, stay engaged and entertained. So that was super rewarding. But at that time, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I had thrown my name in for, a number of administrative openings. I think there was a span of about 3 years, and each year I was averaging about 45 to 50 applications put out there like, hey, let's throw my name in. I don't have a ton of experience yet, besides my six or
Right.
7 years of teaching, my coaching, a bunch of other stuff I've done, a few years in summer school as principal. And I just would never hear back, or I didn't interview. And I was basically told you'd be a really good fit here, but we're just looking for someone that's a little more well versed or has some more time, which to me is a long way of saying is older.
Moment you put your heart and soul into the application, they ask the same information over and over, and then they're like, "You need more experience." But how are you gonna get more experience unless you get hired?
Ex- Exactly, man. And seeing the district hire from outside of the district, what they thought was the right kid and passed over. After a while, that kind of took its toll, beat me up a little bit mentally, just on top of a lot of the stresses of teaching. Going back to working for buildings and grounds and buses, like I have learned, man, there's a whole different ballgame in terms of comparing being physically tired versus mentally. The mental drain of a teacher, it was an onslaught, quite frankly, a lot of times. I didn't know if that's what I wanted to do all the rest of my life just for the sake of summers off, which I did summer school every year, so I never took that. or a good retirement system. At the same time, I was feeling defeated with the whole administrative pursuit, if you will. My wife and I made a family decision to move back closer to home. We just had our youngest, two girls at the time. We wanted them to be closer to their grandparents, and thankfully, we both, grew up in the same area. So at that point, I was like, "Hey, I can entertain a teaching job, but let me see what else is out there for education." And I ended up accepting an instructional technology coaching position, which was super cool. I was no longer in the classroom working with students. Instead, I was working with teachers to help them figure out the best way to utilize all the different tools that they have at their disposal, which post COVID, I think we're just a year or so out at the time, was not only extremely vast, but more vital than it had ever been, just because we realized that it may get returned back to normal and whatever that may mean, but it's different, man. So did that for a year. I enjoyed that, but also at the same token, I didn't escape a lot of the undesirable parts of being in public education. And again, I was looking for more, not just in the leadership department, but I had kind of I've been entertaining the idea of getting into the private sector a little bit. The way I was kind of approaching it is when I came in as a teacher, you hear all the time growing up, find something you can do that you enjoy and you'll never work a day in your life or something to that extent.
Right.
And I appreciated that coming in. The older I got and having a family, I'm like, hey man, my time is money. Like I can make more money for the rest of my life, but I'll never get time back. So I was approaching it like if I'm spending my time doing something, I want the best return I can get on that. Fortune, you're providing for family, that's going to come in the form of dollar signs. So trying to expand my opportunities, look in the private sector a little bit. I've got no harm in saying this, just because I've also learned that sometimes it's who you know versus what you know.
Absolutely.
And I got an opportunity to interview for a business analyst position for a software company that originally I applied for. I got a rejection email. I'm like, well, okay, I'm used to those by now. I have no experience outside of public education. Like, I get it. I was a little surprised because the company is one that my mom did and currently does work for. And she's like, hey, did you ever apply for that job? Yeah, I did. I got rejected. She goes, oh, that's odd. Our hiring manager didn't even see your application. Okay, well, you don't owe me anything, but if you just want to let them know I applied, please feel free. So they talked, and he's like, well, I at least want to interview you.
Hmm.
I like to say my mom got my foot in the door, but I kicked that son of a bitch down, man. It was a great interview. We hit it off really well, and I received a business analyst offer, which at the time came with a nice salary increase, which was great. Flexible hours, being able to learn a ton and see how I can give back in a whole different way and utilize some of my leadership skills from education. I saw it as a great challenge, and I'm really glad I took that.
Time is a very valuable thing moving forward. So that resonates with me too, especially talking about, I know we're going to get into paid time off here in a minute, but with the time that we have off, that being so limited, and it sounds like when you had the opportunity to take a full summer off as an educator or in the education space and you still worked, like, buddy, you got to focus your off time doing some major stuff that really, really helps you mentally reset. Not only physically are you exhausted from your job, is what it sounds like to me, but like mentally there's a lot of stuff going on. So you're high level thinker. It takes a lot of brain power. Some days I come home from work now and I'm like, man, I was writing grants all day. I was sitting at the computer, but for some reason I need a nap.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to focus your time on what restores you. Sometimes that thing's naps to me. So you're working there. You're probably earning some paid time off, aren't you? What's that situation look like?
Yeah, so I came in as a business analyst, and about 2.5 years ago, I was offered an opportunity to apply for a new to the company role as a project manager. And when that came up, I'm like, man, I saw the word manager, and I just couldn't think about my background and my goals and how I wasn't necessarily feeling fully challenged in my current role at the time. I'm like, worst that's going to happen is I'm going to throw my name out there, and nothing's going to come of it. But long story short, a fit was right. I was given the opportunity. I'm in that role now. It's probably the most excited I've been about being in a role. I love being a teacher. I liked having that rapport with students, but what I'm able to do for our company and how I can see the growth of myself in that role, that's been phenomenal in that regard. Still with the same company and everything. Coming in terms of like paid time off, obviously my first few gigs, like I alluded to earlier, if you're not there, you don't get paid. So that was just a decision you had to make. Teaching was every district is different. The district I was at for the longest amount of time, you were given 10 sick days a year, which could roll over. I think you were allowed to keep up to 120 sick days, which is 12 years of not using a single sick day.
Not to mention that you're with teenagers and kids are sick all the time. Your encounters with people are more than many, many jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, and not to mention too, I know with your background, having to come up with sub plans, it's sometimes more work than just being in there sick. Um, but we were given sick days, 10 sick days a year that could roll over and 3 personal days, which during the school year you can use. School year's not a full calendar year, but if you wanna take a long weekend and if you have any traveling, I mean, you're gonna burn through most of that time. That didn't carry over, not that you would ever get to the end of the year and have additional time to use, but that was a little bit tough. Before I dig into my current PTO offering, I got to share a quick story from my first year teaching. So my wife and I knew that with the benefits, we're starting to, we're new to the game. We knew that we wanted to have a family at some point. We knew that we could bank up some of that sick time, and I could use that in the form of FMLA, to take some paternity leave to help her out, which we did end up doing, and that was phenomenal. But I was really cautious and guarded about using my sick days, partially because of that, but also I was raised like, hey, I think my dad's words were, if you're not puking, you're going to school.
So literally
It
you
kind of
were going to school.
right.
It's a career. You're like, "Oh, I'm not puking. I might as well be at work."
Exactly. So it was
Yeah.
my first year teaching. It was the first or second week of May, and I had just wrapped up leading a 3-day seventh grade wide field trip off campus. So a third of our student population had gone on this trip, and I had to plan everything, get chaperones, permission slips, curriculum, all the works. And that was weeks and weeks of work, let alone, those 3 days. Well, by the end of that, I'd been fighting off kind of a nasty head cold for a while. And I'm like, look, man, I'm taking a day. What's one day going to hurt? I slept in a little that day, took my time, started healing up, and my wife was also going through an ed preparation program at the time, and I wanted to go get her some flowers to celebrate her hard work. So I stepped out, ran to the grocery store, picked up a cheap bouquet, stopped at Hardee's after. She prefers real flowers now versus whatever they inject with food dye back then. Anyway, on my way back, I stopped at the Hardee's in town there just to grab a quick burger. I made the mistake of sitting down in the dining room to eat that burger. And I always say it was a mistake because at the time it wasn't. And I didn't find out it was a mistake until about a week later when the following week of school, the bell had rung to dismiss students. About 5 minutes later, my principal came on the PA and said, hey, I need to see Mr. Hames in the office. Mr. Hames in the office. I'm like, okay. So I'm walking down sheepishly, probably a little bit almost arrogantly excited, like, hey, we haven't had a chance to talk. He's gonna be like, I heard about the field trip. Nice work on that.
Great
So I
performance.
walk in and right. I walk in and he goes, hey, shut the door, please. Yeah, what's up? And instantly, like he had me with my tail between my legs. He goes, well, I gave you a week to come in and come to the office and tell me, "W- tell you what? I'm completely taken aback. And like, well, you took that sick day last week, Friday. I was going through the drive-through of Hardee's for lunch, and I saw you in the dining room on your sick day pounding a burger. And I'm like, man, oh, of course. And I had to,
Buttons out because when you're sick, you're not allowed to eat. This is
right. Well, I stumbled back and forth on that. It is lesson, which I can appreciate was, hey, you're a public employee. We need to be careful about how we're perceived in public. You were on a sick day, you shouldn't have been seen out, which I agree with, but also nobody would know that I took a sick day. Like, how do they not know it was a person thing? You know what I mean? And also, yeah, it's my first year teaching. It's in May, man. I took a singular sick day. Like, you got to pick your battles a little bit, but
why were
maybe in
you
hindsight, not true.
Because were you using a sick day too?
Exactly. Like, I don't have the time in my teaching schedule to leave the classroom to run through the drive-through even, but I'm glad you do. Maybe the biggest lesson was go through the drive-through next time and eat the burger at home. But I like to reflect on that story because it just helps remind me of the market difference of where I am now. So in my current role at the company I work for, I'm going to try to explain this the best I can. Each year, you're given 15 personal days to use however you see fit. You're given 4 floating holidays, which are basically just additional personal days that they label as floating holidays. So, for example, like this year, we had to work on Christmas Eve unless you put time off. You
Mhm.
could use a personal day. Like in our system, they put time off in. They're not labeled as such. They're all just personal days, but they differentiate them within their benefits. So you're given 19 days there and then 5 sick days. The sick days don't carry over. For the personal time, you can carry over up to 5 per year. Coming into this calendar year, I carried 5 over from last year. I was given 19 more. and then the 5 sick days. So that means I could technically use 29 days of PTO this year. I always like to try to shoot for 24, just because, I can carry over 5 for next year, and then if I don't use it other time, it's gonna get burned up. But not once in the 3.5, close to 4 years that I've been with this company has my time off request been questioned, has it been denied. And I think it's a testament to, just that trust and that professional respect. Like, I get my job done. There's times where, having kids, when I get home from work, I'm not thinking about or doing work. I need to be there as a dad and as a husband. But
Mhm.
when everyone else is asleep and I got some stuff to catch up on, I'm going to put in an hour or two at night. And they know that. Companies are starting to realize you run a risk of, like, if you're going to micromanage time off, you're going to dial your team members into a 8 to 4 hour workday, and that's how you're going to get them for. Whereas
Yeah, I
now it's
work
like,
I was working that job that I didn't like, you know which one I'm talking about, the one where I left a Tiger Woods cutout in front of your Ring camera, that one? So
That cutout's still alive, by the way.
Josh was, he was borrowing a sander. He was working on his basement, of course, because when he's got a little time off, he's not gonna relax, he's gonna do a construction job at his house. Nice one, Josh. Uh, but to borrow it to him, I brought a cutout of Tiger Woods and put it in front of his Ring camera and rang the doorbell, and they were freaking out and called me about it. It was really fun.
I love that you are our first suspect, if you will.
They knew it was me right away. Maybe because I was parked a couple houses down watching, laughing, maybe.
Oh man.
If you feel like you're allowed to use your time off to recuperate and can be honest about it, like, "Hey, I need a day," you're gonna be able to work with so much more clarity, and you're gonna be able to, like, function and get creative and think outside of the box, where when you're stuck to 3 days out of the year where you're allowed off, like, that sucks, man.
100%, man.
Yeah.
And it's changed my mindset a little bit. Like, there's never a grievance between me and my employer. Like, I'm expected to give my best, and I do, and I try to go beyond that. But then there's no heartburn from my side of, like, hey, this really cool thing that I'd like to do or spend time with my family on is come up, and I'm gonna do it because I
Mhm.
know work will be there, and I'm gonna get caught up, and things will keep moving forward.
To skip ahead to your current situation, you're working with the same company. What else are you doing? You're doing something else that I think is amazing.
A little over a year ago, um, it had been weighing on me a little bit. Like, I did miss the giving back sense of teaching. You're a public employee, you're working with kids, you're molding the youth, as I like to say, and giving back to the area in which you call home. It was last October, our family had stopped by the village fire department because they were having a fall family thing with, you could shoot the hose at this fake burning house, and they had hot dogs and popcorn. Hey, we've been out all day. Let's go stop for some lunch. So we stopped in and we were talking to a few guys. I knew a few of the firefighters, and one of them said, "Hey, you should apply. We're looking for younger, able-bodied guys that have time and a willingness to serve." And I didn't think much of it, but the next couple days, my wife had mentioned, "Hey, when that was suggested to you, I saw like your eyes perk up and like a light bulb went off." And as soon as she said that, I reflected on it more. You're right. It'd be an instant way to give back a little bit and learn something new and stay active,
She was
especially
thinking
since I
funky fireman. That's what she was thinking.
and she got me. Although, I did rock the stash for a while. Maybe we'll bring it back, much to her chagrin, I'm sure. But yeah, so I've been doing that for a year, a little over a year. That was pretty intense. So we have biweekly training sessions with that. Obviously being a volunteer fire department, make any calls that you can. They understand we've all got, other full-time jobs that we have to work around. So that's been a little bit of a challenge trying to coordinate that and pulls you a little bit like, oh crap, I'd love to be there, but I'm out of town working, or I just made dinner for the family. I got to wrap that up and try to get over there. I had to go through like an entry-level firefighter class to get certified. And we're on probation for about a year or so. And when the group of officers feels that, you've fulfilled all your legal obligations, you've showed up to calls, you displayed competency across the department, then they promote you to full-time volunteer firefighter status, which I received about a month ago. That was
Congrats.
that was exciting. Really, the biggest thing that changes is I can show up to, mutual aid assistant type
Mhm.
calls instead of just, my village calls, and the patch on my helmet changed colors.
That's awesome. Right, so Josh had a life as a teacher where he was dictated by bells. He's a glutton for punishment. And of course, he's like, I miss those bells. I need an alarm going off, wake me up at, 2 in the morning when there's a house fire. So he starts just serving his community again. I admire that. So thank you for doing that. I'm sure your community values you so much. let's dive a little bit into what you like to do with your paid time off. So, this is the Paid Time Outdoors podcast. I really enjoy having guests on that enjoy spending some time outdoors, or even if you're spending time indoors doing something really valuable. You were working two jobs. You're a father, you're a husband, you're a dog dad too. That takes a lot of effort too. So you're busy, 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 go, go, go. Now, of course, family takes priority in every situation, right? Making sure that the kids are taken care of, that the wife is taken care of, you're taking care of yourself. So, of course, they're number one priority. So, spending time with them is a way that you're using your PTO. Now, I want to dive into a discussion about you get like a holiday on a Monday, right? And if you use a PTO day on Friday, you got a 4-day weekend. And Josh, you get to do whatever you want on this 4-day weekend. There's a there's a game going on, there's a concert, there's a whatever it is that you're into, that's the prime weekend for this thing. I would like to hear what topic you wanna talk about. What do you wanna do with your day off, your PTO?
Man, that's a great question, Mark. As I think about that a little bit, I'm a busybody. I hate being bored and sedentary, not doing anything. I would also say I like to spend as much time as I can with my family, as you mentioned. My wife's my best friend. A lot of the things we do, whether it's us traveling together to visit friends, we love to go to concerts. We try to do all the Packer activities that we can, being diehard cheeseheads, which we'll always plan around. But I think if there's an activity that it's just me focused on spending that time, the first and quite frankly, probably the only thing that comes to mind is whitetail deer hunting. That's uh
Hell
that's my
yeah!
me time. Yeah, that's my me time, my bread and butter. I got nothing else to say about that, man. I mean I do, but
Sure.
that's the main activity that's just for me.
Okay. So when you're doing some whitetail deer hunting, I'm familiar with that. Let's talk about how it all started. What was your first encounter with whitetail deer hunting? Now, whitetail deer hunting is one of the most popular types of hunting in our country. Almost every state in the US you can hunt a whitetail in. There are only a couple that you can't. Hunting culture is amazing in some states. In some states, they say, okay, your season's very limited. But I know where you're from, sometimes there's even a week of school that is off so that people can go out and do some deer hunting. So, what was your first memory of whitetail deer hunting as you were growing up?
That's a nostalgic type question, Mark, and I appreciate it. And first off, I know you know a thing or two about deer hunting. I've seen a picture or two of you with a few deer, and they look like they came off the wall at Cabela's in town here. My first
Okay.
memory, I remember when I grew up, it was you had to be 12 years old to be able to legally operate a firearm for any hunting. That has since changed. I'm not even familiar with what it is now, but at the time it was 12. And I remember before then, I think I was 10 at the time.
Mhm.
So we're talking 25, 26 years ago now. I'd tag along with my dad and my grandpa down where they had grown up on public land, which was a trip learning how to hunt on public land. I was just there to, try to soak in and learn some different things. Hunting was a big culture of our family. I'm glad it stuck with me. And I'd walk around behind, my dad and my grandpa, obviously both with weapons. I'd carry a stick and to pretend like I'm carrying a gun. And it was probably a suggestion that came from my dad or my grandpa, and I'm glad that they came up with that because now it's second nature. But you're learning how to try to walk quietly, not drag your feet, and look for signs of deer and wildlife as you move. I think my favorite part of hunting during those first couple years were the snacks. My grandma was phenomenal
But yeah.
at making a great white bread salami sandwich that I'd have devoured by about 7 a.m. in the morning.
So I can relate to hunting whitetail 100%. As time went on, I actually had my mom sew me a cloth pouch because the snacks that I was eating in the deer woods were those, like, zebra cake, Christmas trees. I like those Nature Valley granola bars, and I was like, "Mom, my problem with hunting right now is that my snacks are too loud. I
Yeah.
wanna be as quiet as possible," and this was as, like, a 13-year-old kid. Yeah, I had issues. I was
No,
like
dude, you that's
was like, "Mom,
wisdom.
mom, my snacks are making too much noise. How do we solve this problem?" And my mom sewed me up some bags that I could close and tie with a string. So I'd get like a Snickers bar, I get like my Swiss rolls. Usually Snickers bar is breakfast when I'm in the deer woods. All the snacks I needed, and then the morning that I was going out hunting, I would open the snacks and dump them in the cloth bag. I could take that cloth bag, flip it inside out, wash it in the wash machine, and felt fine with using it again next time. You open a soda can or a Monster, or you have your wrappers and you're just, like, looking
Yeah.
around before you open them. And I had her make this cloth bag, and I'm still using that cloth bag to this day.
That is does your mom have an Etsy shop? I might have to hear one of those. That is a genius idea. I'm not sure why I never thought of that at that age. I'm sitting there trying to be quiet, and of course, when you're quiet, you're moving slow, but you're not changing the noise, it's just taking longer to open. My dad would look over and whisper, "Oh, just open the damn thing." You know? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So you went hunting, you're the stick man in the woods. You're going out there. Do you remember the first time that you saw a whitetail when you were in the woods? After you were introduced to hunting, that is, because that's very different than if you're seeing them as you're driving or you're in your car seat. Do you remember anything about the first time you saw one when you were out in the woods?
Absolutely. The first one I remember seeing out in the woods, was my first year legally hunting on opening day. So I was 12. And, it was late November, and the area we were hunting was, at the time, it was an Ernebuck zone, meaning you had to shoot a doe before you were legally allowed to harvest a buck, or an antler deer of 3 inches or more. And it was 20 minutes past opening light, and my grandpa and I were in a ground blind. My dad was probably a couple hundred yards away. Again, we're on public land, and we hear something start to come in, and 15 to 20 yards away, right in front of me, broadside, stops a beautiful 8-point buck, and I'm sitting there, and, it's I guess it's admirable how I handled that as a 12-year-old, because all I remember thinking is, "Wow, that's beautiful." My heart's pumping, which is one thing that, I love that has never changed, from that first day. But I knew I couldn't shoot it. I'm just sitting there appreciating the beauty of the moment and of this deer, and I'm with my grandpa. Deer takes off, and my grandpa's like, "Damn it." I'm, like, looking at him, I'm like, "What? I didn't do anything wrong, right?" And he goes, "No, I just wish, we could have shot that deer." But I remained positive and upbeat, and about 2 or 3 hours later, a nice doe came in, and, same distance away, and I was able to drop that one there. And I still remember seeing that 8-pointer. I didn't harvest another deer that year, but to me, it didn't matter, man. I was on the board. I got my first legal deer of my life, and that's what hooked me. And,
Right.
I can look
I
back
can
to that for the
imagine that
rest of my hunting career.
I can imagine that your grandpa, being like a seasoned veteran of the deer woods, was like, "You know how many times I sat and saw absolutely nothing? And for your first sit, this beautiful buck walks in, like, that is some sort of symbol of something. That is very special, Josh." But I imagine your grandpa,
Totally.
"I sat in the dang stand for 35 years and saw nothing but 50 squirrels a day and this deer that we're not allowed to shoot." Also, high five for following the law and regulation, because there are some people in this world that are happy to disobey the law, and that would be a poaching charge and do that.
100%, man. Yeah. Yeah, I think to that point, Mark, I just wanna add too, one of the things I appreciate most about my grandpa as a hunter and as a steward of wildlife is he just appreciates the law the way it is. Love it, hate it, disagree, agree with the people that come up with it. That's part of sportsmanship and how we can practice conservationism. And I didn't know any different from even before I started hunting, and I still do my best to practice that today. And I agree with you, though. I know guys personally that, well, whatever, nobody's gonna know any different, but
Right.
what could that do for the ecosystem? And gotta give the animals a chance too.
Like, the laws are that way for a reason.
Exactly.
Sometimes, like, the Erna-Buck states or the Erna-Buck counties are that way because the does there are so many does that they need a way to force people to take does. There are even some places that cull them, which means they have sharpshooters that take them out, but I imagine how tempting that could be as a, "Hey, we're going out deer hunting," you get yourself ready to go, this buck walks in, and, "Wow, look at this thing," and grandpa guides you to make the right choice. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely.
You've been deer hunting maybe 20 years, 25 years,
Yeah, about 25.
something like it. So you've been hunting for that long. Do you imagine kind of taking your grandpa's role for your kids now, one day?
Absolutely. Absolutely. God willing that my daughters choose and are able to have kids. I mean, I'd love to do that. And my grandpa now, he helps out with learn to hunt programs. He's part of the NWTF. I had heard you talk about that with Ken. So he's super active in that, taking a lot of times too in the Madison area. He'll take people, college students. Hey, I've never hunted before. I'd like to learn to hunt. So he'll take them out, and I'd love to do that. That's how you keep the sport alive. You keep
Yeah.
passing it along. And I also don't want to force it. Grew up hunting with my two younger brothers who, for different reasons of their own, and that's completely up to them, they don't hunt anymore. There could be 100 different reasons for that. And I think it's something that just comes naturally. And if you've got that passion and interest in it, focus in supporting those folks.
I remember the first couple years of your oldest daughter, she would call every meat venison. She was, like, so stoked that she was eating venison, and even, like, you would cook chicken, like, we'd come over for dinner or we'd have a gathering, and she'd be like, "Venison?" And you guys would be like, "Yep." Like, "Yep, that's it."
Proud moment.
Mhm. So you've been hunting for years. You had a really unique buck a few years back that you got, so I think you shot him late November, but he was still in velvet.
Yeah, man, I think it was just after COVID. So it had to be about 4, maybe 5 years ago now.
Mhm.
I so fast forward a little bit. Grew up my first few years hunting only public land. I'm thankful my grandma owns 40 acres of mostly wooded terrain, and she's opened it up to more folks to come in deer hunting. And myself, my brothers, my dad, we were welcomed in, obviously, with open arms. So learning to hunt that was so much different than public. I mean, I have an actual tree stand I can hunt down. I have boundaries I know of. It's a lot easier to spot other hunters and where people should be. So that really changed the game. And I'd like to say that some of the success or luck, if you'll call it that, that I've had over the years wouldn't be the same on public land, just the amount of pressure you have and the number of hunters and or depending on where you hunt, what the herd looks like. But anyway, I had been in my stand at the time, which up until I had got this deer, we put it in my grandpa, my dad, and I about 8 or 9 years prior, and I keep a tally in my stand now, like my my hit list.
You Snapchat me a picture of you putting the tally on, I'm like, "Yeah, Josh, way to go,
Yeah,
buddy."
I think I do that now before I get down and send a picture of my deer. I just have to make sure that I've watched it long enough to make
Yeah,
sure
can't
that it's
erase
been
those,
harvested.
so make sure you
Exactly. But yeah, it was opening day of gun deer at the time. I was in my stand, the property just west of us. I don't believe anybody was hunting there at the time, which was beneficial to this story. I had two cousins on the property and my uncle. So again, you've got, 4 or 5 hunters on 40 acres. That's pretty concentrated, but we've all got our little areas,
but
different,
you're keeping herds and you're trying to all fill your freezer so you can eat over the next year.
percent. And because there's so many, 40, 50, maybe 100-acre plots in the area, if a hunter takes a few shots at a deer and kicks it off their property, well, you better be ready. But with this one, it had come in and I kind of seen a little brown and heard some noise. So I got ready, and sure enough, I saw it was a deer, and I got my scope up. I try to size it up a little bit. The first day I've become more selective, by no means a big buck hunter. I don't have the luxury of doing that on the amount of time, I'm able to go hunting and with, pressure of other hunters too. But that first day you can be a little selective. You don't have to shoot 5 minutes after light just because you see something. But as I got my gun up, I had noticed something moving on top of the head, and I'm like, wow, it's a nice deer. Kind of see your peripherals, you don't think anything of it, and stopped. It gave me a nice shot about 50 yards out, and I took it, dropped him right there, watched for a while, made sure he was, fully harvested. I like to stay in my stand for a while just to be respectful to the other hunters around. I don't need to go around cracking a bunch of branches, skipping and yawn and making a bunch of noise. So after about an hour, maybe longer, I got down and
So you're up in the
I went
stand,
over.
you just made a great shot, your deer is, down just over within eyesight. What do you do there? Is there a phone call you make? Is there, something like a tradition or, like, something that you do that grandpa taught you in the deer stand? What is, like, your first move? Like,
Said, man, you're like putting me in the moment. After I, make sure my safety's on and everything, I'll typically set my gun down. And when I know that I've got the deer, I'm fist pumping and I just, I'm like, yeah, 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 that sort of thing. And of course, too, just you really got to focus on your breathing and dialing your heart down a little bit. And, that's a sign for me that I know I love this. It's a passion of mine. The day I don't feel that anymore is the day I hang it up. Do that. We have a group chat of all the hunters in the woods. I shot a deer. If I know it's a buck, I'll tell them it's a buck. I usually don't know how many points we're looking at, but
Right.
not
And in a
until I
lot of
have a picture.
sorry to step on you, but a lot of states, you are allowed to use two-way radios and communicate with other hunters. I know Illinois is one of them where you can radio and say, "Hey, just wanna give you a heads up, that shot you heard, I've got a deer down," which is a great way to communicate. And some other states, you're not allowed to communicate at all what's going on. But in the state that Josh is hunting, he's allowed to communicate with the people around him, basically saying, "Hey, guys, take it away from there."
Yeah, just because too, if I hear a shot that sounds like it was on our property, I'm like, "Hey, was that one of you guys?" Just because I'm rooting for our whole camp.
Mhm,
If I don't get one, I don't care. I want us to be successful.
mhm.
But I also like to share that. Sometimes we'll give a little intel too. Hey, I took a deer. There were two more there, and they might be headed your way. We actually did use walkie-talkies growing up on public land. The same, it was legal. I'm not sure if that's still the case. We've kind of moved past walkie-talkies, although I would love to bring those back, man. That was so fun.
I've got him.
I like to, let my wife know, when it's gun deer season, she's at home with the kids, starting to set up for Christmas, which bless her heart, man, she gets those kids so excited to do that. So I can, be on my time, right? I always let my grandpa know, and then, I pass a picture along when I finally have the opportunity to get down. So I did all that stuff, make sure, all my gear's packed up on my stand so I don't have to climb back up again and get down safely and start making my way over slowly. And, as I get over to it, I always wanna make sure I see the body of the deer, which, when you're up in a tree, it's way different than down. You got some little rolling valleys and such and down logs and brush, so it's a little bit different vantage point.
I've had times before where I'm up in a stand and I shot the deer, it's right over that way, but then when you get down on the ground, it's a different world.
I'll make landmarks from my tree stand. I need to look for that tree. Or, okay, I
Exactly.
see the sun now. If I start heading there in the next 5 minutes, heading towards the sun, I know I'm going to hit it.
I remember being 14 and, I got a hold of my dad on the walkie and said, "Dad, I just shot one. I didn't see it go down. It just went over the hill. Could you come help me?" And what I would do is kind of like walk him into where I think, the deer was when I got a shot off. Because I knew in years past, like I was doing circles before, like, where did I hit this deer? Where was it when I took my shot? Because once you hit the ground, it's a different world. And I remember walking my dad into, okay, go to the right. Okay, you need to go this way, go back, and that working really, really well. That's exactly where it was, and then I get on the ground, I'm so glad that we did that.
100%. You're still full of adrenaline, your heart's pumping, and when you're young, you're a little more impatient. You just want to find your harvest, and you're moving quicker than you should. I'd like to think that, with each year that comes, I try to learn something new. And part of that is to take your time. Yeah, you can always go back and recircle, but every time you do that, you risk, stepping on a trail, missing a clue, whatever. Like, just take your time. You'll find it.
This deer was really unique. I remember you sent me a picture, and even though it was, like, late rut, this deer still had velvet on its horns.
Yeah, man. So as I'm approaching the deer, I finally see the body. I'm always a little bit curious. Okay, what are we talking about here for antlers? As my grandpa always said, you can't eat the antlers anyway. But it's always an added bonus on a beautiful deer. So
Yeah.
getting closer and, I could see that it's got some nice size to it. I'm like, it doesn't look as white as normal. And sure enough, I come up close and it is full of velvet still, which, at this point of the year is super rare. Typically, the deer will start shedding their velvet, a month, maybe 2 months earlier than we're talking about, with this story. So that was super unique. As I'm, handling the deer too, I realized that the antlers were spongy, rubbery almost even. Yes, they had rigidity to them and they were firm. They probably could have done, what deer use their antlers for, but you could tell they're almost a little bit brittle. So never have harvested deer like that before. Never seen one hunting. Likely never will again. So certainly a
Hey,
unique
we
buck.
might hunt Kentucky or Tennessee one day, brother, so you never
Never
know.
say never. Yeah, totally. After we had registered the deer and got it all cleaned out, ready to bring back to, start processing it, we dragged it onto a trail where we could grab the gator and haul it back to camp. Somewhere along the way, one of the G2s, which are, one of the points in the antler of the deer's antlers had snapped off. So
Hold on.
that was kind of,
Let's take a pause for a moment and
yeah,
your G2
moment
snapped.
of silence.
Holy
Moment
cow.
of silence.
Moment of silence for that G2. So it snapped off somehow. First off, you never know that you're out of shape until you're dragging a deer out of the woods. Let me just throw that
Oh
out.
my goodness.
Okay. So you're dragging and I mean, couple 100 pounds, keeping this thing out. A lot of times start moving, you get out and you're like, oh man, like we've only gone 20 yards, 30 yards. And to find that this awesome animal that you've taken, the antler's broken, what does that feel like?
Well, first off, I'd lie if I say I wasn't a little bit beaten down, from that. But, to your point, it was myself, my dad, who's, he's always been one of my hunting buddies too, obviously, with my grandpa. And then my cousin had come to help. It was a large deer, but I've always been a little bit cautious with, I mean, most deer, you can hang the deer, from the antlers as
Right.
you're taking the hide off and, quartering it and whatnot. This one I was like, we should, really be careful. So we were like, I have this fancy little belt I put on and, tied to the deer. And I was dragging kind of from the front. They each grabbed a leg. But when you're hauling a deer out of the woods, man, it doesn't matter if you're just dragging on leaves or, and that's going to be rare to none because you're always going to hit a down log or some brush. You feel every point of resistance. And even though it was only a 30, 40-yard drag to the trail, we must have hit something at some point, and because they were brittle, it popped off, and we're excited. I didn't pay any attention to that, until later on. I was looking closer. I'm like, "What the heck?" So I'd go back to pictures I took before we dragged it. I'm like, "That was there, man. It's not there now. Like, that had to snap off. How did that happen?" I actually went out in the woods, later that afternoon when no one else was out, and I'm,
Search for it.
decked out in my orange, and I'm looking for a needle in the haystack, and I probably spent a half hour, and I didn't find it, and I'm like, "Dang it, that stinks." I'm like, "You know what? What does that matter?" Like, the rest of the wreck is still super cool. I have pictures of it. You can't take the memory away. I wasn't out here for the sake of putting something on the wall, even though it's on the wall now.
Right.
But
So when you
yeah, so
on that note, you had the deer taxidermied, they did the antlers. Did you have them rebuild that point?
I didn't. I thought about it. I had to because it still had the velvet, and your options are in your taxidermy the deer. That's still living flesh technically. So you either have to preserve that, which is the additional cost to the shoulder mount, or you got to take it off. I'm like, well, I don't want to take that off. You make a product. It's called Velvalock, and I gave it to my taxidermist. I bought him a bottle, and he sprayed like half of it. Let it air out for a couple days, and man, this has been handful of years now, and it hasn't there's no change to the velvet.
There was never, like, a smell to it or anything like that? It was just
Nope, never, and, it survived the move. None of the other antlers have chipped or broken, none of the velvet came off, so I'll stand by the product in the one use case we have, but I did do some research, like, of guys with similar instances, and apparently you can drill into the antler, and I'm sure there's a lot of different ways, but you can put, like, pipe cleaner in there if you want, and then build, a mold or use some clay to, like, build what pictures have, and I'm like, "Okay, I
oh,
could do
for
that," but
what
number
kind?
1, I can't get the velvet back on it, and 2, I'm like, "Who cares? It's part of the story now," you know?
So, I've heard of velvet deer where folks they'll have them taxidermied and there's, like, a fake velvet spray. So what the
Really?
taxidermist will do is we'll take all the velvet off of it and then use this spray and coat them with this fake velvet so it doesn't smell, bugs don't get into it, that kinda thing. That's pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah, that sounds cool,
Yeah.
but this stuff worked well, you can't smell any chemicals from it. I actually ended up contacting the state DNR, that week, after we got back in the swing of things, and I'm like, "Hey, I shot this deer, this velveted buck. It's got kind of a spongy rack to it. Do you have any ideas what could have happened?" And I think the two possibilities that they put forth were one, there could be a hormone deficiency, just maybe not the full concentration of hormones to the natural development. Or they said, there could have been an unfortunate accident for the male anatomy across the barbed wire fence, that that
Ooh.
could have played a similar role on affecting some of the hormones. So either way, but likely a once in a lifetime buck. And yeah, that was one I won't forget.
And that was a few years ago. I mean, after that season, Josh, you found some success. It seems like every year you're filling the freezer. So kudos to you. And I pretty much replaced red meat with venison, so beef, any other red meat. And I imagine it's pretty valuable to you too, considering that your oldest daughter calls every meat venison.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Mark, honestly, we for sure haven't bought ground beef from the store in over a decade. It would have, preceded my wife and I being married. Steaks, yeah, every now and then you'll buy, a ribeye or
Yeah.
something, but I'm also lucky to have my in-laws, they raise cattle. So, sometimes we'll get meat as a gift, which is a phenomenal gift. We haven't we have the luxury of full freezers. In fact, great timing. I got a text earlier today from our meat processor that my meat order from this year is ready to pick up. So,
Yeah,
got to
buddy.
make sure we got room in the freezer and gonna go pick up some sticks and summer sausage, and
That's
yeah,
awesome.
man, it's one of my favorite parts about it.
So I know that deer hunting takes a lot of effort. You were talking about how tough it is to drag a deer out of the woods. It takes a lot of work, not to mention you're waking up when it's still dark out and you're hunting the whole day till it's dark out again. Josh, time is valuable. So I know you're spending your days when you're working exerting a ton of energy. And deer hunting, you're just exerting a ton of energy. What do you get out of deer hunting? I know that physically it takes a lot of work to deer hunt. So why is deer hunting so valuable to you?
I think the word I used for my wife that we both kinda laughed at, before this gun season was tradition, and I don't like necessarily the all-encompassing idea of we're gonna do something because it's always been that way. But for me, man, I missed one opening gun deer, hunting season since, I was 10 years old, and that's because I had a mandatory class for my graduate program that I couldn't miss, otherwise I'd fail the course. I was able to get down later that day, but I didn't make the morning. And to me, it's more than just that. We get together as a family, before we're always playing cards and sharing stories, and I'm excited to hear how their hunt went. I love being out in the woods, man. In fact, this past year hunting, I watched 3 deer come in and they got attacked by 2 red-tailed hawks.
Holy
I've never
cow.
seen that before. I'm like, wow, that's wild. I've, just seeing the deer come in, you're like, you know what? It's a little early in the day. I could tell you're a smaller deer. I will let you survive another year. I can't speak for others or for the winter that we get. And I just appreciate their beauty and just being in that environment because the opportunities to get out away from technology and from your normal day-to-day obligations are so rare. I try to soak all of that up. And to me, that's what keeps me going. When you do see that deer, hey, I would love to harvest this one, to add to my memory collection, also to provide for my family. Now your heart is just in your throat and it's a thrill and you've got to calm down and think about what are the steps? How do I do this safely? You need to make sure of who's around me. And to me, all of that process is what keeps me after it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm tired at the end of a long weekend, but you sleep when you're dead, as they say, right?
I was telling Ken when we were talking about turkey hunting last week how it just kind of hits different when you're feeding people the deer or the turkey or whatever it is that you found, even mushroom hunting. When you're like, "Hey, I found this and I am giving you this out of nature that I found," it hits so different. I think there's something real special about that.
Absolutely, man. It's so many processors now. You can take your whole deer in, and they'll cut up the steaks for you and debone everything, and they'll even ground some up. And while that would be convenient, to me, I almost find it therapeutic and part of the whole experience to do almost everything myself. I've got the resources, in my house to be able to do it. Usually I'll
Mhm,
throw on some football, have a couple beers as I'm doing it. And I'm just like, man, it's
mhm.
why, I can make sure I'm not wasting any of this. I can make sure the meat's clean. I'm providing for myself, my family, other loved ones. And, there is a sense of pride, for lack of better words, with that, but also just, belonging and responsibility that I really appreciate with the whole thing.
I think that something to think about is that sometimes you're working weird hours, you have a moment off, you're firefighting, but active recovery is an important thing too, because you don't wanna just stop full tilt. You're up and moving nonstop. You're working with the fire department, you're really busy with your current position, not to mention that socially, you're going to grandma's place and, you're messaging dad, "Hey, dad, we got one down." You didn't get one, let's share what we harvested. That's like a huge dimension to deer hunting, and the culture where you come from for deer hunting is a very unique thing to the whole country, I would say. I shot my first deer in a region not far from where you deer hunt, where we had to check them in at the gas station. So before there was online check-in systems, we would go to the gas station and check it in. They would like look at the teeth and see how old it is and do a couple of tests, and then they would put a metal tag on it and yep, your deer is checked in. And I remember my first deer, the guy at the gas station, I checked it in and it was high-fiving me. And he was like, "Congratulations, your first deer. This is a very, very special moment." And like the culture is a huge aspect to it too. It's not like you just go out and you're just harvesting some critters and then you fill the freezer. There is special relationships that from a 2-day season that I've spent with people, I will always have them in a special place in my heart.
100%, man. I miss those gas station registration opportunities. Plus the back tags that you'd get as well. You know, we'd always make a game of it, like who's got the best poker hand, or does anybody have a straight?
From the
I
numbers
think
off
one
of your
year,
phone.
right? I think one year I had a full house on my tag from the numbers. But times change and people you have to change with them too. But that doesn't mean that you still can't, focus on some of the other smaller parts of what make the experience something you look forward to every year.
Yeah. Was it tough to learn how to deer hunt?
I think, being a young kid, especially before I could hunt, I'd be out there trying to stay warm, pounding my snacks. You get bored a little bit if you're not seeing anything. That was tough for a while. I brought books, that helped a lot. I'd think of some dumb games I can't even remember now that would just pass some of the time. But I think the biggest battle was just staying warm at that time and trying to be safe when you're hunting around. God knows, how many people and who they are. But as I got a little bit older and, was able to become more self-sufficient, learn some things and like, "Hey, dad, I know you taught me this, but I've got it now. I can go out and prep the whole thing myself. I can take care of everything, from plate to table, as they say, farm to plate, whatever the expression
Forest to
is."
forest.
Right. It's those things that I picked up along the way that reinforce that I know what I'm doing here, and I appreciate the opportunity to keep doing that and making memories. And to your point earlier, I hope that my daughters will give me the opportunity to help them the same way. But I'm never going to force that either. With anything that becomes an interest, you have to want to have that passion and to learn and to suffer a little bit at times, and it's up to you.
On your journey for deer hunting, for rifle deer hunting, I'm sure there are some things that are discouraging, right? You're just learning how to do this. It's really foreign and it's really a new thing. You probably feel pretty vulnerable. What is something that's really discouraging when you're learning this new thing of deer hunting?
I know talking with other people and experiencing myself, early on, like you're sitting out there and you're not seeing a thing, or you see something but it's sprinting and you don't have a shot, and you're like, well, what the heck am I doing? That could be tainted by like, hey, yeah, sure, I got a deer my very first legal, hunting day.
Mhm.
That's not always that way. So you need to remind yourself that. I remember going from public to my grandma's private land. I hadn't got a deer in a couple of years, so I was really, on the schneid, and I had to get off, man. I saw one deer that season, and it was in the neighbor's farmer field. And I think I was 14 or 15 at the time. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't shed a few tears out of frustration watching that deer turn the other way and knowing I wasn't going to get a legal shot at it. But I think it was part of that. Hey, I've learned a lot. I do like this. I've had the success. Like, yeah, you could quit, but what do you get out of that? Like, is that really how you want it to end? If you're never going to try it again, like, give it another shot. And
And it
sure
makes
enough,
you
you do
feel that
that.
much sweeter too.
Right. Absolutely. You do it enough and you see some other people have some success in your group and you get excited for them and eventually that will boost your morale and it just comes. But you also have to be able to spend the time to get out there.
Yeah. We have a mutual friend who, he's been deer hunting for like 20, 25 years, and he's harvested 3 deer, and every year he takes his paid time off, going to deer camp, spending time with dad, spending time with his family, doing things at deer camp. Whatever they harvest, they share amongst all the people there. It's pretty tough where they are because wolves, are
Yeah.
really harvesting a lot of deer, but there's something special about deer hunting where, um, you know, you're going out with people that value it like you do, and like I said, like, there must be something to it if he's spending so much time out there and he's harvested 3 deer in, like, 25 years. I harvested 3 deer in, like, a long weekend, you know,
Yeah.
weekend, which is, like, completely different. Like,
Right.
no, like, poker prod to him, that just I'm in a very different place than he is. But even at that, I'm sharing deer meat with my buddies. If Josh ever gives me a call and it's like, "Hey, man, we're hurting for deer meat. Guess what? I got a freezer full and I'm sending some your way." But my point is that it's so valuable spending time with people, using that time to recover from your tough weeks of work, your tough whole year of work because the season's so short. The deer hunting is a really special way to recover. And I know for myself, my paid time off, I'm using that to deer hunt mostly. That's how I spend most of my time. So to those folks that are just learning to hunt or interested in it, there are some really tough hurdles to that. One, cost. If you wanna hunt, you have to take a hunter safety course. You have to learn those things, learn the seasons, and then equipment. You need the gear, you need a full outfit, you need, the weapon to harvest, and it makes it really tough. What kind of tips or tricks do you have for somebody who listens to this and says, "Hey, I wanna try deer hunting next year."
I think I would say a point I made earlier is sometimes it's who you know. If you know anyone that's, serious about the sport and has gear, extra gear on hand that they'd be willing to lend and you could trust them that it's maintained, be afraid to reach out. Sometimes it takes a village to get people started. There are so many learn to hunt programs too. As you go through a hunter education course, you can make relationships. A lot of times, even I think in Wisconsin, I saw we have 71 different whitetail deer banquets coming up in the next 4 months alone. And that's an opportunity to meet people in your area, that are willing to lend a hand. They invite hunters from all walks of earth and levels of experience. There's tons of different raffles where you can win certain things, for pretty cheap tickets to enter. Through some of those learn to hunt programs too, you have the chance to be given some gear and you can learn some tricks of the trade. Like it's not like, "Hey, I'd like to try hunting," and now you need to, go to YouTube or Google and come up with a shopping list and run to Fleet Farm or Cabela's or whatever and try to find everything. Like, if you're truly serious about it and you don't have, the prior knowledge or experience or someone you know directly, there's a lot of different local programs depending on where you're at that can lend a hand to get you started and take you on a hunt. Like, "Hey, I have done this before. I know what I'm doing. I'm gonna take you to where I think we'll get something." And a lot of those too, I believe, are free of charge. It's all volunteer led. People that just love the sport. My grandpa does that. It's one of his favorite things to do to give back. He's hooked a few people throughout that process that otherwise never had the chance.
I think first admitting that you wanna try it is, like, the big thing, and then being vulnerable and willing to be vulnerable and ask the question, "This is something I really wanna try." I mean, if you go to, like, the name the box store that sells hunting gear, right? Like, if you go to Scheels or Farm King or Bass Pro Shop, Cabela's, and say, "I'm really looking to get into deer hunting, I've never done it before. How can I get into this?" Most of the people who are working those jobs have a passion for that, for a reason. You're not working as a firefighter, like, just because. And if you're willing to be vulnerable and ask those questions, you can oftentimes get an answer, that relates to, like, local Whitetails Unlimited chapters or, "Hey, actually, I have some property. If you're really interested, we can bring you in and teach you how to do it." But I think being vulnerable is something that's really important to learning. I mean, if that's something that interests somebody.
As with anything, man, you've gotta be vulnerable. I mean, even let's say you've got all the gear and you've got time to do it, and well, now you need somewhere to go. Like ask questions. It's very common around here throughout the state. Farmers are more than happy to have people come hunt their land. You just have to ask them. Go knock on their door or get a phone number, give them a call. There's apps out there to learn, what public land is accessible,
Mhm.
and then of course you always want to approach it with the safety lens in mind too. Like make sure you know the rules and regulations. Try to find some other hunters you can talk to, if you've got specific questions. I heard in an earlier episode of your podcast too, there's so many resources online, former YouTube videos and links and different other podcasts you can listen to too that will teach you most of what you need to know if you're serious about trying. But the biggest thing too is, it's just like going to work. No one's necessarily forcing you to get out of bed to do it. If you're really serious about it, you gotta force yourself to do those things and make yourself a little uncomfortable to hopefully find, maybe a new passion.
So deer hunting is how Josh likes to recover. He's a busy guy. He uses a lot of his energy towards deer hunting, and makes him feel recouped when it's time to go back to work. Do you think you'll hunt deer forever? When's the time to call it quits?
Well, in my mind right now, There's two ways that I'll call it quits. Either one, I'll die.
I hope that doesn't happen.
I agree. Or two, um, I all of a sudden realize when I'm in the moment that I don't have that same passion. And by that I mean when I see a deer and I'm more than willing and legally obligated to be able to attempt to harvest, if my heart's not pumping, if I'm not excited about packing the night before to head down, then it's time to call it quits. Because what are you doing it for? It's clearly not giving back what you're looking for. I don't know if you knew this, Mark. My 86-year-old grandma, who hadn't hunted for about 13 or 14 years, she went out for the first time this past season and she harvested a very nice doe
Wow.
on opening day. Maybe deer hunting's a little bit genetic, and if so, hopefully I've got that in my blood too. But being able to see her excitement, how everyone kind of rallied around her, that was empowering. Like, there's no reason, man. If you've got the passion, you'll always come up with an excuse to not do something. Don't let those be the reason why you don't do it.
Hmm. Well, that's awesome. Well, I hope that Grandma has quite a few more seasons in her.
I do too.
Same.
Yep.
Don't go dying on us, brother.
I'll try not.
All right. So, deer hunting, something super important to me. Clearly, it's important to you as well. When you go back to work, do you feel refreshed after it's the deer hunting weekend? I know you have a million things going on. Finally, when you come back to reality, is life different?
Life is different a little bit. In the years where I do harvest a deer, coming back to work that Monday, it is a little bit hectic in terms of work to catch up on. I've got a deer that usually I have to finish processing, cleaning up my gear, putting stuff away, catching up on stuff around the house. All that stuff can add up. I always know though I have the benefit of like Thanksgiving is right around the corner, and with that comes some company sponsored time off that I can, catch up on too. So that helps mentally a little bit, not be such a daunting thing. But, that's part of the whole process. I know when I step away from work, whatever I want or need to do needs to be worth it because there's going to be plenty to catch up on upon my returns. To
Mhm.
me, it's always been worth the return, taking that time away.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Josh, for joining us to talk about deer hunting as your recovery. Once again, is a super busy dude. I pretty much figure whatever Josh uses his paid time off for must be extremely valuable in concentrate. The time you spend doing those things really reassures me that I'm spending my time, doing the right things too. Because sometimes, you're in the deer stand, you're spending a lot of time. I've heard from my wife before, "Am I gonna see you at all this fall? You've
Yeah.
been hunting every day." I'm hunting, it's a north wind, of course I'm hunting, or whatever it is. And sometimes it wears you down. And it feels good to have some reassurance that somebody as busy as you is using the same thing to recuperate, to re-energize, to spend his paid time off.
Yeah.
Once
Yeah.
again, Josh, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that some other folks listening to this podcast decide that maybe they want to give deer hunting a try. As we're ending the podcast, do you have any couple pieces of advice for those who might want to try deer hunting for the first time?
Go into it with an open mind and an open heart, being, willing to grow and to learn and try something new. You'll never regret a moment outdoors, even when the weather's not great. That's part of the whole experience. It helps you appreciate part of the journey a little bit. If you do have dependents, a family or whatever, make sure you're pouring into that other ways too, so you don't have that pulling on you when you're out in the woods. We all have responsibilities, outside of work too, that deserve your time and attention. And I'm fortunate to have awesome support from my wife, and my daughters are super excited throughout the whole thing. And I think the biggest thing, Mark, that we've talked about with it is don't get to a point in your life where you said, I wish I would have tried something new. If you have that feeling now, it's not going to go away and you're going to regret it later. Reach out to someone, try it, and the worst that happens is you tried it and you didn't like it. The best that happens is you follow one of your newest, best passions of your life.
That's very well said, Josh. And that's a wrap for another episode of the Paid Time Outdoors podcast. Big thanks to Josh for showing us, whether you're coaching a team or answering a siren, how you spend your time off kind of defines your legacy. So go out, unplug, use your time wisely, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Paid Time Outdoors podcast. Thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.